Hello, everyone, and warmly welcome to today's Nordic Roadshow. My name is Moa Seidlitz, and I am the representative of BUS2BUS and Messe Berlin in Sweden. And I'm with the German-Swedish Chamber of Commerce located in Stockholm. I'm very excited to deep dive in the Nordic perspective with all of you and with our experts here today. And with that, I will pass on the mic to my Finnish colleague, Saija.
Hei kaikille, hi everyone, and greetings from Helsinki. My name is Saija Taattola and I'm representative of Messe Berlin here in Finland. And yeah, it's so nice to see you all here today and wish you all great roadshow.
Good morning. Hi and hello from Norway. My name is Jan Heimans from Oslo, Norway. I'm working in the German-Norwegian Chamber of Commerce, who represents the Messe Berlin in Norway. I'm looking forward to today's Nordic Roadshow and looking forward to the discussions and fruitful insights into tomorrow's mobility. Welcome and have a nice session here. And now I'm passing over to Willow, who will introduce you to our today's moderator, Mikko.
Hi, welcome everybody to our next edition of the BUS2BUS Digital Roadshow. My name is Willow Beck-Jewett. I am one of the product managers in the BUS2BUS team, and I welcome everybody today to this interesting panel discussion. Before we get that started, I'm going to just say a few words about BUS2BUS and what you can expect next year. So I've actually had the opportunity to follow BUS2BUS and be part of it since it started in 2017. And it's been really nice to see how this event has grown and evolved over the years. So for those of you who don't know what BUS2BUS is, we are a mobility trade show and business platform here in Berlin. And it will take place next year for the fourth time in April 2024. And BUS2BUS really attracts a wide range of European and German exhibitors and trade visitors. And this is coming from urban and public transport, the private sector, as well as bus tourism and long-distance transport. And we really focus on the future technologies and sustainable solutions. So we would actually welcome everybody to come and visit us in Berlin. At the moment, we are offering our early bird rate for exhibitors. So if there's anybody out there today looking to register to be an exhibitor, please mark that in your calendars. At the end of October is when that rate will end and our normal prices will begin. And this year, we will feature a Nordic pavilion in the trade show at BUS2BUS. So if there's any Nordic companies out there looking at our roadshow today and you're interested in being part of that pavilion, please get in touch with the international representatives or the BUS2BUS team to get more information on that. So I believe after that, we should get this panel started. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome our moderator today. His name is Mikko Koskue, and he is the Counsellor for Trade and Investment at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and the Embassy of Berlin here in Berlin. So welcome, Mikko.
Thank you, Willow, for the introduction, and also hello from my side.
Now, Mikko, you also bring a lot of mobility expertise to our roadshow today. So you've worked at Daimler, actually, in Stuttgart, and you were the lead of the program of automotive and mobility solutions at Business Finland for quite a long time. So I would like to ask you, to get this panel started, what is your feeling? What is the future of mobility and what does it mean to you?
Oh, well, the future of mobility, a very good and a complicated question. I always refer to the four famous letters of Daimler, which are Ks. That means connected, automated, shared, and electric. And these four megatrends shape the whole automotive and mobility industry and the landscape. I would say above all in the passenger car side, but in some extent also in the bus segment and when it comes to last mile solutions as well. Then looking it from the Finnish perspective, Finland is not a kind of a traditional automotive country, but when it comes to these 4 mega trends which are shaping the automotive industry, we have lots of innovative companies from Finland who offer innovative solutions to these mega trends, or let's say sectors. Then
Yes, I would just like to say thank you for those insights. And yes, we're definitely looking forward to diving into the world and the innovations coming from the Nordic countries. So please, I will pass the digital microphone off to you and we will meet our mobility experts.
Yes, then it's my pleasure to introduce our 4 panelists. First, from Sweden, we have Anna Grönlund, who is the Deputy Managing Director at Swedish Bus and Coach Federation. Welcome, Anna. Then we have Agnieszka Skora, who is Business Development Manager at Kempower, which is a Finnish charging infrastructure provider. Welcome, Agnieszka. Then we have from Norway, Johan C. Haveland, CEO of Asistobe. And last but not least, from Sweden, we have Gerhard Wennerström, Managing Director at Samtrafiken. Then I would go to the first round, and for the first question, we start with Nordic mobility trends, with the kind of a status quo and a general overview of modern Nordic mobility. First question is to Anna. The Nordic countries have often been recognized for their early advancements in the mobility sector. Can you highlight some specific areas where Sweden is leading the way?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the introduction. Well, I would say the development in Sweden is very much based upon the fact that we already in the 90s introduced public procurement to the sector. We was one of the first, I think, in Europe. Since then, we have developed a lot of both technical but also partnership developments and joint ventures in the sector. And one of the most successful things we have been doing together, the traffic operators, the commercial coach companies, and the PTAs in Sweden, is that we have achieved almost the goal for the fossil-free transport sector. Today, for example, over 85% of the buses and coaches in Sweden are fossil-free, mainly running on biofuels. We have also developed a system and a lot of recommendations regarding the public procurements and standards and recommendations for how to make good procurements. That has been a joint venture for the sector, and I think that's one of the backgrounds to our so far successful travel. Of course, the pandemic hit the Swedish public transport sector hard, just as it did for the rest of the world. We had a decrease in passengers. Now it has went up again, but we still lack about 10% of our passengers after the pandemic. So we, in 2021, we did a joint venture together in the sector, the organization for the Swedish PTA, Svensk Kollektivtrafik, the organization for the train operators, Tågföretagen, and our organization, the Bus and Coach Federation. We did a joint venture saying that 2030, we want 4 out of 10 travels, motorized travels, to be with a public transport system. And now we're developing and following that goal in order to establish new concepts and new initiatives to get our passengers back and to attract even more passengers than before the pandemic to the public transport sector.
Okay, Anna, thank you very much for the great answer, and very good that you took up also the public procurement. Yeah, I forgot to mention to all of people online that you are able to ask questions all the time to the panelists. Just put it in the chat, and I will try to ask your questions. Next, we will have a sustainability question to Gerhard. How does Samtrafiken plan to contribute to Sweden becoming a leading country in sustainable travel, and what strategies are in place to achieve this vision?
Thank you, Mikko. I'd like to first pick up something that Anna told here, is that Sweden started the liberalization in the 90s, and after that Sweden has been in the forefront in liberalizing the public transport in many different ways in the train operations as well as the bus operations and so on. So by being there, we have a lot of different companies and different actors in the whole public transport system. And what we do in Samtrafiken that I represent is that we keep the whole offering together. So when we talk about sustainable travel, the aim is of course to get rid of the concept of having a private car. The concept of that being a norm. And the first thing that we have been working on already for 30 years within Samtrafiken is that you can travel your long distance journeys by combining any of all these operators that are operating in Sweden, and any travel modes also. So it can be both in one place and so-called one ticket. And that's the contribution that we have been doing so far. And another thing that we were quite let's say forerunner in was that we started with open data already 2011, that we had this kind of open data portal for all public transport data, and that has then made that you have information about the complete offering in Sweden in every mobile phone, because both Google and Apple takes the open data from us and puts it into their maps and so on. So that's also a way of let's say lowering the barriers to take part of the offering that the public transport really has, is to have information in as many places as possible. So those are the two steps that we are working with now, and I'm glad to come back to more the future visions also.
Okay, thank you, Gerhard. Next question about artificial intelligence to Johan. AI seems to be the next big topic in the mobility of the future. How does Asistobe AI-based functionality optimize public transport in Norway, and what are the key benefits for the customers?
So I think AI is changing everything, and my travel into AI is maybe not the traditional way. So I was director of passenger transportation for the light rail system in Bergen, and I worked with public transport in Bergen in Norway for 15 years as a consultant and as a C-level executive. So and I want to make data-driven decisions, and so AI can help us with many things, like all the things from predictive maintenance to autonomous vehicles. AI is such a key. But when you're running a public transport system, you lack one information. And I love that people have open data. But we were going to attract more passengers to public transport, which is the essential thing. There's only one way to attract more passengers, and that is convert car drivers. And to understand car driving, you need to understand how people move. So while I was still in Bergen transport system, I reached out to the industry to get deeper understanding of how people move. So in my city, we had a survey of about 5% of this population in 2013. We asked people, how do you move? And in 2017, I criticized this. I can use public transit data to say that something was wrong. So we did an update in 2018. And this is very common in all over Europe. I was in Zagreb last week and in Debrecen in Hungary yesterday. We're making decisions for 2030 based on snapshots in time. So what we do and Asistobe is provide deep understanding of how people move, and we predict the future of mobility. So the name of the company is Asistobe. So as is the historical data. What we do is combining mobile network data with public transit data, demography, micromobility, to get a real good, deep understanding of how people move. And that is, I founded 7 companies. So basically, anyone working in private sector, if you don't know the demand, how can you optimize the supply? So the key for a better public transport system is to understand why, where, when people move. And that's what we do. And then we also, so basically, and then you have to make sense of this information. So we present this in a front end, in a SaaS tool, where you can get AI assisted help to make better decisions, to make cost efficient systems. So you don't run too crowded buses and you don't run too empty buses. When should you run buses? So that is kind of the key benefits, is that using more and better data sources, using the power of artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms, we can predict future and we can optimize the public transport and then transport more people for less money. And when I travel throughout Europe, the public budgets are under distress. So it's also important kind of to make public transport systems which are cost efficient. And obviously, if we transport more people for less money and we convert car drivers into bus passengers, then we are also reducing the CO2 footprint.
Great, thank you, Johan. Very nice. Last question of the first round about alternative drives to Agnieszka. In the context of the energy transition, which technology, battery or fuel cell, do you believe holds the most promise and why? And maybe additionally, you could elaborate a bit what is the role of Kempower, Kempower's EV charging solutions. What is the role of your company in this landscape?
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Well, as a representative of Kempower, I should say that the most promising is the electric vehicle and the electric infrastructure. But to be honest, I think that there's no single and same solution for everyone. It will all depend on the type of the transportation. I mean, for long distances, there has to be a different solution because the needs are different. The requirements are different compared to the urban and public transport in the cities. However, to use the fuel cells, we have to produce, we have to transport and stock the fuel. So we have to have a green hydrogen that we will be able to provide to the buses, to the coaches. So the challenge, the logistic challenge, is big, and we have to remember at the same time that it has to be a green hydrogen to make so that it makes sense. However, the fueling time and the vehicle range are better in this case. So in the case of long distances, probably the utilization of the hydrogen will make more sense. At the same time, if we look at the constant improvement of the charging technology, so liquid-cooled satellites, liquid-cooled cables, DMCS that is already almost ready for the trucks, the bigger and bigger capacities of the batteries. It led me think that probably we will be still able to provide the electrical solution also for the long distances traveling, and not only for the transportation in the cities. In any case, we have to be ready with the whole infrastructure. And about the second part of the question, well, as you said on the beginning, Finland is not an automotive country. And like my colleague has said recently, when you are in Finland, you can find yourself in the middle of nowhere with your house, when there's a lot of space all around you. So all you can do is to invest in the innovations. And this is what Kempower did, actually, because we already know since years how to produce a charger. But Kempower, as a quite young company, started after all the other manufacturers. And before that, we decided to first analyze the market, and we decided to see what are the actual challenges, not the challenges that we faced like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but what are the needs today. And today, the questions we are asking is how to optimize the utilization of the energy, of the power that we have installed, how to improve the charging infrastructure efficiency, and how to share the power in a sufficient way, how to avoid the queues, because we have more and more electric vehicles on the road. So we are observing the situations where the cars and the buses are waiting for their turn to be charged. So we have created a different technology of charging, which is based on the solution where the whole power is installed in a power unit and is then dynamically shared between multiple outputs, which allows to avoid the over-dimensioning of the charging infrastructure on one side, to adapt the power that we deliver to each and every charging point to the real needs of the vehicles that are behind on the other side of the infrastructure. And we use the power in a very optimal way compared to the standalone stations that are normally installed until now.
Great, thank you, Agnieszka. And actually, we continue with you and start the second round, which is about the alternative drives and mobility infrastructure. With you touched a bit already in your first answer, but in your opinion, what does the Europe's charging infrastructure network need to look like, especially on over long distances?
Yes, I will probably repeat the same thing many times during this session, because those are really important topics for all of us. So the first thing that we have to take into account is the sufficiency. It's the sufficient number of plugs, of power, and of charging speed. If we want to be efficient with our charging infrastructure, with our electric transportation, we have to be ready with the right infrastructure, sufficient infrastructure. The second thing that I would have to mention is the unification and accessibility. So for the long distances, we have to remember that the buses and the coaches will travel between different cities, between different regions, between different countries, which means that it has to be easily accessible for everyone, for the drivers, for the operators from different countries, different regions. So the driver doesn't have to use 10,000 different apps, 10,000 different tags to charge. He has to be able to charge the vehicle, no matter the place, no matter the time. The infrastructure has to be dense enough to answer the needs of every operator. The infrastructure and the vehicles needs to be kind of identical when it comes to the protocols of communication, when it comes to the technology that are in use. And the last thing I'd like to mention is that if we want the charging infrastructure to be sufficient, we have to have enough of support and input from the legislation point of view. We have to have enough of subsidies from our governments. We have to have that kind of help also from our side, from the other side, to be able to create the really good and effective charging infrastructure.
Okay, thanks. Then we have still to Agnieszka, we have one question from the audience. A bit political question. I think we should try to not get too much into the politics here. But the question is about, you said that when we are talking about electric mobility and electrobuses, the energy, the electricity should come from the green energy. Do you consider nuclear power as green? I know a Finn living in Germany. Finland and Germany are quite two opposites of Europe. Finland getting a lot of electricity from nuclear power, and Germany trying to get rid of the last pieces of nuclear power. So how do you see this?
How do I see this? Well, I will. If it has to be my opinion, I have to say three things. I'm working for a Finnish company. I'm based in Poland, and I'm mainly responsible for French market. It allows me to have a quite large view on that topic, because France, for example, is using a nuclear power. Poland is really based on the carbon, so I have a comparison of both. From that perspective, I would say that the nuclear power is much greener than, for example, like carbon power. So I know that Germany started to reduce the utilization of the nuclear power, but I think that it still can be considered as a more or less green energy.
Okay, thanks. And one more question, Agnieszka. The AFIR implementation seems to focus on private cars and lorries, at least in Sweden. How can the sector put the needs of the coach sector higher up on the agenda, on the political agenda?
How can the sector put the needs? I think we first of all, when it comes to the cars, the implementation is really high in this moment. We are for the buses as well. So we are starting to focus on the next step. So the trucks and coaches, and for that, actually, we have to show what's the impact. First of all, second thing, we have to be ready with the right infrastructure. So we have to get the right support. But I think that the numbers are showing that this kind of transportation cannot be forgotten. This is still quite a big part of the transportation. and we have to move to this direction as well. We cannot focus only on the urban transportation. But I think this is something that everybody is aware of, and it's a question of technology that needs to be ready for that, and then we can move forward with the right argument.
Thank you, Agnieszka, and sorry for asking so many questions in once to you. Next to Johan, given the growing interest in alternative drives for public transport, how does Asistobe leverage AI and big data to analyze and optimize the integration of electric or hydrogen-powered vehicles into public transport planning?
So I think this is a couple of questions. So basically, what we are mainly focusing is making public transport cost efficient. And cost efficiency basically, what's the cost of a bus? Is the cost of the driver, the cost of the vehicle, and the cost of the fuel, or if it's natural gas or electricity or hydrogen. So that's one thing. It's kind of, you have to consider what is the cost of it. But they also compared to when we look at where you can charge vehicles, you might have to change how you drive your roads. So back to how is people moving? Where does it make sense to charge vehicles? New technologies have sometimes new technologies shouldn't be used just to replicate what you did. I think boats are a good example for this. Boats are we come from Nordic countries. Many of us have boats or ferries as part of the public transport system. We surely do in Bergen on the west coast of Norway. So what are we doing with the ferries and boats and the transition into either hydrogen or electric boats? And I actually have a background in marine technology. So are we trying to replicate the boats or ferries we have now with a capacity for 300, 400 people? Or do we take advantage of new technologies, where you can have large ferries demand a lot of power? So could we rather have smaller vehicles, more flexible systems? So dig into what are the opportunities given to us by new energy sources. But it's also, I think this cost efficiency is very complicated. Like I said, I visited our customer in Debrecen in Hungary yesterday, and the cost of electricity now is so high that they are actually having problems with running their brand new electric vehicles and put them into operation. So there's many questions about cost efficiency. And the sad thing now is, it seems like in some countries, the diesel is more cost efficient than electricity. So you have to really think about where you put charging stations, when and where you charge the buses, and where you drive them. And that is kind of what we come in to do, looking at the formulas and the math behind route optimization, depending on new energy sources.
Great, thank you, Johan. Anna, you mentioned already the public procurement, and what factors are most important to your Sveriges Bussföretag Association members when they are deciding whether to add electric or hydrogen buses to their fleet?
Often the PTA's demands are the one that sort of make the choice. The PTAs either ask for a specific bus type, or, which we prefer, sort of have functional demands, and then our members, the traffic companies, could choose among the different options. It's in Sweden, I would say, there is not so many hydrogen buses or coaches. We don't see that development coming. What we see is electric battery buses, depot charged for the public transport services in urban and suburban areas. For coaches, just like Agnieszka earlier said, we need biofuels for a long term. And as I mentioned before, the Swedish sector has been very successful in transferring to a fossil-free bus and coach and public transport sector. Today, over 85% of all buses and coaches in Sweden are running on fossil-free fuels, mainly HVO or biodiesels, some biogas, and some electric buses and coaches as well, but mainly biofuels. We are, from a Nordic perspective, I think I can speak for both Sweden, Norway, and Finland in this matter. We are very frustrated and also worried and a bit confused over the strong resistance towards biofuels like biodiesels on a European level. We think, and we know, and we have shown that those fuels are very good. They help the companies to do the transition, and you can use an ordinary diesel bus or coach and get it fossil free in no time at all, and it doesn't make any harm to the engine at all. So that's one of our experiences.
Thank you, Anna. Still continue with you. Can you tell a bit more about the funding and regulations for alternative drives in Sweden and how that is affecting your members and the industry?
You mean the funding and for the transition?
Yes,
transition?
Yeah.
We had an introduction support for electric vehicles for urban buses that was established several years ago, and it has helped. Unfortunately, our government decided to shift that into suburban buses and coaches from the beginning of August this year. We still think there is approximately 3,500 urban buses, city buses running in Sweden. And up to today, we have 1,000 of them is now electrical. For suburban buses and for coaches, long-distance coaches, the situation is much more difficult as there is too few options on the market for our traffic companies to choose among when they shall buy those vehicles in an electric mode.
Okay.
So today we don't get as much support as we would like from the Swedish government. Also, after the pandemic, the regions in Sweden, who is the authorities for public transport, has a sort of backlog and are quite heavily pressed by the costs of the pandemic and the healthcare system. So the regions are not so anxious about shifting vehicles towards electricity at the moment, but we will see.
Thank you, Anna. Then we have a question to Gerhard. How is Samtrafiken incorporating alternative modes of transportation, such as electric scooters or bike sharing services, into its multimodal ticket solutions that you already mentioned, to provide customers with comprehensive and sustainable travel options?
Yes. When we are talking about the infrastructure, we are very, let's say, keen on keeping to standards. And when we are in this ticketing field, we are heavily heavily focusing on the OSDM standard, which is the open sales and distribution model, which is a pan-European standard for every booking system out there in whole of Europe. So that's one standard that we are very much into. Then we are into standards about the data. It's called NetX and so on, the different data standards. And then there are ticketing standards, and the European Union is now also focusing on let's say making a European standard for the ticketing. In Sweden, we have had a standard called it's BOB, which is a standard for let's say ordinary public transport tickets. And I want to come back to the issue that I had with open data before, because when we have the data open for instance, these bike sharing companies or scooter companies and so on, to have the public transport in their offering to their customers also, and making their kind of products together with the let's say classical public transport. Then one issue is the technical issue, and of course the infrastructure needed there, that you are following these standards, and you have you know how to fetch tickets and how to distribute them and so on. That's one thing, and that's, I dare to say, even the easier thing. The more complicated thing, and the thing that we really need to focus much more on, is to have some kind of standardized product, so that a scooter company tier can let's say know what kind of product is behind, for instance, a public transport button. You are wherever you are in any city, and you just have the tier app or whatever scooter company's app, and then I want a public transport ticket here. Then you need to know what you're getting. So the user interfaces and how the customers really understand what they get and so on needs to be much easier. Today we are all too much relying on let's say a journey planner that you fill in your destination and such things in beforehand. But I think we need to think even much more simpler. And Germany there is a lot of discussion about the German 49 euro ticket and so on. And the main thing about that is maybe not even the cost or so on. It's that it's easy. It's easy to communicate, easy to understand, easy to use. And that's as important as these kind of technical infrastructures that we also need, of course, to make it technically possible to use. But so that I would like to emphasize, that we need to have some kind of unified, standardized way of thinking, that what is behind these let's say technical solutions. What do I get when I am a micromobility provider and so on? So that's our next step that we are working on a lot.
Thank you, Gerhard. And actually, we have a question for you from the audience. How are the budgets structured by Samtrafiken for ETS in the Nordics? What is the basis for payouts to operators?
Mm-hmm. There's two things in this question I understand. But one thing is the budget of let's say keeping the whole ecosystem together and let's say feeding the open data platform with data, which we do daily and so on. So there we have a through Samtrafiken, the collaboration company, we have a let's say a scheme that what parties pay for and how much they pay. And so that's one thing that we do in collaboration. The other thing is that then when things are sold through the system, as I understand that the payouts for operators, what they get here, that's let's say today it's they get exactly what the tickets costs. We have some exceptions. We have some kind of ticket that is valid in the whole of Sweden also, and there we have this kind of scheme that all the parties get their fair share of the income of the certain tickets and so on. The key here is to have this kind of collaboration company as Samtrafiken where you can agree these things. You need to have that kind of a body.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Gerhard. Then we have a question from the audience to Johan. How can data help to solve the conflict of providing modern, user-centric public transport on the one hand and still make it profitable for operators on the other hand?
It's a huge question. So let's. I want to start with. So data is still an assistant. It's still something that helps us make decisions. I still believe strongly in understanding local traffic situation and local traffic, and kind of have the human knowledge in combination with AI and data-driven decisions. But I think there's a couple of things. So if you do have a deeper understanding of how people move, and I mean not snapshots, updated, an understanding of effect of football games and rock concerts and festivals and summer vacation, how do people move? So we can provide that. So then we can start using this information to plan better. And I think there's a couple of things. I'll say something controversial first. I worked for the PTA in Bergen for 15 years. I'm not sure the PTA makes the best decisions. The system in the Nordics with a very strict schedule for PTOs is removing some of the operators from making cost-efficient decisions. So I'm afraid of that, and I'm afraid that some of the PTAs, and I'm not saying everyone, has lost some of the contact with the real customers they are serving, and they will benefit more of listening to the PTOs and even giving the PTOs and the operators more freedom to operate in a cost-efficient way and listen to them. And even in Bergen, there was a big thing last year when the bus drivers actually went to the newspaper to say that we are the ones who know where the buses should run. We know where it's full. We know where it's empty. And obviously we could do that with data as well. But it was kind of a signal that the PTA isn't listening. So a couple of years ago, when the PTA in Bergen changed the kind of main big corridors and main lines of the bus structure, they said something, and I don't take my numbers for granted. They said something that 30% of the customer will have a better service, 50% neutral, and 20% worse, or whatever that means. So what we could have done is said that I could have said that home X% would have a shorter travel time, not from the bus passenger, but for everyone. We're looking at the whole population. We can look at travel times. We can look at many different things to analyze data to make it more cost efficient. So and then it's back to user-centric public transport. So we do analysis of the interaction of micromobility and public transport. It's fairly easy to see where there are gaps in the public transport network. How is passenger going off and on public transport and going further with micromobility? And obviously then there's DRT, kind of which we haven't touched upon yet, kind of the switch to demand responsive transit. Where does it make sense to switch from fixed lines into to on-demand transport and make this as a whole system? Because I do listen to my colleague panelists, but this mix of some PTA-driven schedules and private operators trying to fill some gaps, this has some flaws and it lacks planning, and we are kind of hoping that the other parts are doing their job. I see many of my panelists want to say something, so I probably said something controversial.
Yeah, thank you. I think, Anna and Gerhard, you want to add something. Maybe Anna first.
Thank you. It was very refreshing to listen to you, Johan, and I do agree. You didn't say anything controversial. I think there is what you say is being common knowledge in the sector, but I think that everyone is thinking of how should we do it? How should we cooperate in a better way? Because that's really the clue, I would say. And we have established some good partnership and some joint ventures in Sweden, but we need to do it more. And I do agree with you. The knowledge of the system is often among the traffic operators because they know how it works in the daily on a daily basis. And of course, if you combine that with data-driven knowledge, you would get a tremendous palette of information that could serve the passengers in a much better way. And I think also the new generation of passengers, they sort of expect that we would do that. They are used to use data in their daily life and in their work in another way. So we need to keep up with that if we should sort of reach for at least a goal in Sweden that 4 out of 10 motorized travel should be by public transport. We need to have an updated service. And as you say, there's a lot of things going on like soccer games and everything else. And also people's habits change. We could see that after the pandemic. We have to deal with the fact that a lot of people are working not 5 days a week at their office. Some people still have to, like bus drivers or people working in the healthcare system or people who is teachers to young children, etc., etc. They have to be on site, but many of us don't need to be on site. So we have to sort of combine all this knowledge into a new service that will attract even more people to use the bus and to use public transport service.
Great addition, Anna. Thank you. And then Gerhard, please.
Thank you. It's more like a question or challenge to Johan here about the data and the true, let's say, movements and so on that you're talking about. And I completely agree. But what we know already today is that the big tech companies in Silicon Valley, they have all this data already. The Googles and Apples and Facebooks and so on, they have all this data already. But now to my question, you have been in Bergen PTA also, is that as soon as we talk about these kind of companies together with the PTAs, then they are very reluctant to let's say cooperate and see that, whoa, we don't want Google to sell our tickets, for instance, and so on. What's your reflection on that?
Can I answer, Koskue? Or so yeah. Obviously, when I started my journey into understanding how people move, one of my first meetings was with Replica HQ, Alphabet Group, Google Group company in Silicon Valley, and to my surprise, they wouldn't even sell me data. Their data is so powerful that they wouldn't even sell it. Because they knew I was living in Europe. They know that I have to be GDPR compliant. So, and that's why we have to find sources where we can make to get understanding of how people move. So what we are doing is combining a lot of data sources, and one of them is mobile network data. And mobile network data is not from apps. That is from your phone. Is connected to towers and then anonymized and randomized and removed everything that can kind of identify you as a person. So that's the first kind of. But mobile network data in itself is a weak source. So that's why we have developed technology to combine it with your open data sources, Gerhard. So I've been into the Swedish, what's it called, Trafikla, something, I can't remember the site now, but some site where we can download data, the GTFS files. I'm still missing some data. I would like more data to be open. You're not sharing everything. So that's kind of, we're using GDPR compliant sources, we can actually make a much better picture. And it's still a data model. It's not a true picture which you might get from Google, but it's a really good picture of how people move.
Thank you, Johan. Then we have Agnieszka.
Yes, just a quick comment also from my side about the utilization of the data that we already have, as Gerhard has mentioned, and that Johan can deliver, and about the sufficiency of the actions that are taken in this moment. I'm observing this market, like public procurements from my side, as I was participating in many different public tenders for the delivery of the charging infrastructure. And what I could observe is that quite often the PTAs are scared to create something new. So what they need is to be more encouraged by the authorities, because what they know, all we know is that we have to reduce the CO2 emission. So that's the goal. But how to do it? Some PTAs don't know that. They just know that they have to change the infrastructure to the electric one, or to the gas, to the hydrogen, whatever it is. But the question is how to do it. And quite often I see that they don't really have the courage to go deep into the topic. So what I see from my side is also kind of copy paste of the tenders, of the procurements that has already been done before. So I would like to use this opportunity to be present on the in this panel to encourage somehow people who are listening to us to use that data that we have, that Johan can provide, that Gerhard is talking about, to use our knowledge of the solution providers. We can explain how it can work, how it can be optimized. So this is something that does exist, but we just have to use it.
Great, thank you, Agnieszka. Then we have a question from the audience, a common question anyone of you can answer. How do fleet management and telematic systems contribute to sustainability in the Nordics? And how common is their use? Anyone who wants to take this? Anna.
I could.
Yeah.
I could take it, I think, and then Johan maybe. I think it's. I would say that our big traffic companies, the big traffic operators, are using it frequently. It's a part of their aim and their needs, I would say, in order to use their buses and coaches in the best way. And sometimes the most difficult part in that, I would say, is that the PTAs, the authorities, and the PTOs have different system, and there should all be sort of introduced to the vehicle itself, the bus or the coach. Sometimes you could see screens or interiors of a bus and coach with a lot of different computers and screens in order to get the right data, in order to follow up the fuel consumption, for example, or the route running or anything, the ticketing system. I would say that's one of the challenges for this sector ahead, to get those different systems talk to each other and to correspond, so that we, both the companies and the sort of users of the different data could benefit from this in a more harmonized and better presented way. It could also be a stress factor for the drivers, actually, to have all those different screens and services on board. But in the bottom, well, it's used, and it's used a lot, and it's increasing.
Thank you. Johan, you wanted to add something?
I think this is a very, very good question, because obviously when I travel throughout Europe and speak to customers, there's Many customers have fleet management systems. Many operators have fleet management and telematics systems. But the question is how it contributes to sustainability. And when I'll go back to my PTA ask the big question to PTA. Our operators are mainly using telematic system to make sure that they deliver what the PTA asks for, to deliver on time, to kind of deliver a bus driver and a bus at the station he's supposed to be. And it's not real, and obviously they do fuel optimization, they do a lot of things which contributes, but it could be used so much better for just the system they actually have to make it more sustainable than it's done now, more than just accommodating the contract needs of the PTA, or unless you then trust that the PTA has planned the optimal sustainable public transport system.
Thank you, Johan. Gerhard, you had also some comments.
Yes, I think this is very, very interesting, because now we are when we are talking about sustainability and fleets, what I foresee in the future is that we have huge fleets of cars that are shared, of course, shared cars that are let's say managed as a fleet. You can call it, for instance, Uber or whatever, and then that's combined with vehicle to grid functionality, so that you can use all the combined capacity of batteries out there in all these kind of cars, and optimize it for the power usage. That will, for the total power usage of the total fleet, not only the public transport fleet, but also the shared car fleet. That will be a huge potential. Nothing that we have used so far, but there is a huge potential.
Okay, thank you. Before going to the third round, we have one question, maybe short answers from the audience. I think it's a very good question. Why do Scandinavian or Nordic countries succeed better than other European countries in moving even very demanding car drivers to public transport? And if we consider our countries now, we don't have Denmark here, but Sweden, Finland, and Norway, countries with very long distances. So how do you see, or is it first of all true that we succeed better in the Nordics, and if yes, why?
I wouldn't say that we do, actually. We are very good at doing it in our cities and in our urban areas. But if you go to the rural areas, at least in Sweden, most of the passengers in the public transport system, without the cities and the sort of commuter lines that goes from A to B every day on a regular basis, outside of that, the passengers are mostly school children and elderly people.
Thank you. Anna, Johan, you wanted to add something.
I think kind of, and this is not my AI competence, but kind of I see something we've done in the Nordics is and this is it's not to make public transport better, but sometimes make it harder to drive. So we have toll roads, we are removing car parking in cities. So that's kind of part, at least in Bergen, I think that's part of the success, is actually making it a bit harder to drive. I would like to add one thing, is the trap of the electric vehicle car. And the trend we see in Norway is that, okay, so EVs are better than diesel driven cars. But also now we see that young people think it's as environmental friendly to drive an EV as taking public transport. And this kind of returning to Gerhard's kind of comment, this is a very dangerous trend we're seeing. And I hope we can transform kind of this trend into some shared cars, because the trend in Norway, which is kind of one of the most successful EV countries in the world, is that we have so much cars. People now have both 2 and 3 cars, and more cars, it leads to more driving.
Yeah, and then you still have the problem with getting enough space for all those cars within the cities. So yeah, I would agree. The need for different, if you call them bans or restrictions, for at least and mainly in urban areas, are one of the key factors that has been established within the Nordic countries. But there's a huge difference from urban to rural areas, and also there is, of course, a question of cost. To provide a very rural area with a public transport system that sort of attracts the adult working population is very costly.
Great, thank you. And then we have a few questions about new customer needs and desires. First to Anna. The bus and coach sector has a kind of an old-fashioned image. In your opinion, how can we achieve a higher attractiveness and perception of the bus?
I think we could use some of the things we have been said before. If we could deliver a service that's also digital and very easily to connect to and to understand, many of those digital services that has been developed by both PTAs and PTOs is more passenger and user friendly than I remember when I was young. You had to read a timetable, and it was very, very difficult to understand how the bus would run. Now you can see it in real time as well. So that's one of them, to develop the sort of services around the bus and coach. Then I would also like to pinpoint some of the systems we've seen within Europe, like bus rapid transit systems, like in Norway, in Trondheim, like in Denmark. They're building a tremendous system in Aalborg that will be launched next year. We have some very good systems in France, for example, BRT systems. They are really, really good. And if we could see many more of those systems, especially in the urban areas, we would sort of put the bus on the map in a better way, I would think. And then it's you couldn't compromise with those systems, and they are really show-offs for the capacity and the benefits of the bus.
Thank you, Anna. Johan, I think you have mentioned already, but maybe shortly, how do you think, how can big data, AI and machine learning impact the public transportation in a positive way to make it a kind of more appealing than your own car?
Yeah, I'm not gonna talk for long on this. I think I said this multiple times. But when we make the models for how people, to make it more appealing, we know all this from the cities using surveys or whatever they use. You know that kind of the appeal to drivers is, or if you choose a car or a bus, is total travel time, is frequency, reliability, it's comfort and price in some kind of order, making your decision. So basically, I think at least with comfort, if that is space, kind of if you get a seat on a bus, we can look at that, and it's very easy to look at kind of how it impacts, and we can, and obviously for the travel times, we can understand big chunks of how people move. And I just want to add one thing which is changing public transport. So with new data source, we can have updated data every day on how people move. So when we change something, we can measure. And I think one of the great things we saw in the pandemic was that we could change faster. Kind of demand planning went down. Kind of you were more, at least in some cities, you were planning on a shorter notice. And I'm hoping that public transport and with the procurements will kind of look into more ways to change and adapt to changes of how people move, and not just kind of to see how will we drive buses for the next 8 years.
Great. Then to Gerhard about multimodal ticketing and multimodal traveling you already mentioned, but how is Samtrafiken adapting your multimodal ticket solution to meet the changing needs and demands of today's customers, especially in light of emerging mobility trends and preferences?
Mm-hmm. Well, today, as you had in your question here, is about ticketing, and tickets are today extremely focused on being within the mobile. It's in the mobile, the actual ticket. What I foresee and what we are preparing for, and what the standards that we are using also is preparing for, is to go further than that. That you don't talk about tickets. You have like more of a subscription. And you have a subscription of your mobility needs. And we have had quite a few of these so-called mobility as a service tryouts, and all of them have failed so far. And why have they failed? Because they have been too complicated. That's one thing. And then there is one thing, that we haven't fulfilled the need in the same way as let's say we did when Spotify came. You fulfilled a need in a way that it was so easy to let's say change your habits because you got everything for a subscription, and I think it's something like that the let's say public transport or this whole mobility sector needs, is that you get these kind of subscription and it's as easy as using any subscription that you are used to use. And what are we doing then? What we are doing is really to foresee that the standards that we are, let's say, using now nationwide in Sweden is then going to support that kind of thinking and support a subscription mode of, let's say, taking advantage of the services that all these different actors, including the micromobility actors and the shared cars and so on, can then use this kind of subscription, and everything is then handled in the cloud.
Very good, thank you. Agnieszka, the increasing demand for electric buses and vehicles has brought a significant impact on new travel offers and mobility hubs. What role does user-centered design play in creating spaces that cater to both the needs of bus operators as well as their passengers?
I think it's most related to the coaches than to the buses, because when it comes to the charging sessions for the urban transportation, it takes place with when the bus is on the depot or during the breaks between the roads. But when it comes to the coaches and long distance transportation, then it starts to be important. But first of all, what means user-centered design in the context of the changing transport to electric ones? So the first question is, what is important to them? That was a question that was already asked before by Johan also. So to analyze what are those needs, what needs to be designed in such a way to be focused on the user. So it's the accessibility, it's the comfort, it's the safety, the travel time, how they want to travel, where they want to travel, how much time they have. Is it for vacations? Is it for, I don't know, life or family needs? Is it for work? So we have to first all ask that kind of questions about the passengers to know what it means to be focused on their needs. And it has to be asked by both, by buses and by chargers manufacturers. From the bus side, I would say that this matter is quite clear, because the important things are certainly the number of seats, the travel comfort, the space for luggage, travel time, and therefore also the range of the buses. So that kind of topics are important when it comes to the change to the electric buses, because we know that the batteries take more space. The weight of the vehicle is different, so it needs to be designed in a different way to answer the needs that were answered with a, let's say, traditional bus. But when it comes to the charging infrastructure, the very important thing is the charging time, for sure, because it will take place during the journey. So it has to be designed in such a way to not to make them feel the travelers uncomfortable by using electric coach. But at the same time, we have to remember that the accessibility and the user-friendly infrastructure has to be designed also in a right way for the drivers of the buses. We cannot forget the drivers at the same time, because they will be the one who will charge the buses. They will be the one who will have to take the brakes and use those brakes also to charge the coaches. Because the charging of the vehicle, the bus, the coach, while on the road involves a brake in the journey, it's extremely important to adapt the infrastructure, the road infrastructure to that. Not only the charging infrastructure, but of course, that's the main topic, but also the parking slots. They need to be properly equipped. There needs to be space for rest, indoor, outdoor. There should be place for children, a place for where the passengers and the driver can, I don't know, stretch a bit during the long journey, so that the travelers can use the stopover time for themselves. So first and basic thing is that the charging time has to be as short as possible, the range of the vehicle as large as possible, and the space has to be adapted to the needs of the travelers, of the passengers and the bus driver. If we do so, if we design the infrastructure in such a way, it can bring as a result the fact that the drivers, the travelers, the passengers will feel comfortable by choosing the bus instead of the car. So it will reduce the usage of the cars. It will bring the better utilization of the buses of the coaches. So it will allow also to the operators to offer an interesting solution for the passengers.
Okay, thank you. We have a roughly 10 minutes time. We have a question, again, open question, so anyone can answer. Question from the audience. The future will not be about the fleet management systems, but much more about mobility management systems. But this will require a market PTA-driven open PT interface model where sustainability is built in. How do you see? How will PTA drive this development across all traffic types? Anyone? Gerhard, yes, please.
I would say that it's not going to happen without EU legislation.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Good point. Anyone else?
Obviously, I can add that I don't think you need EU legislation. I don't think that's correct. I think we have the data. I just don't think that those in charge of public transport have the data. So it won't be driven by PTAs if they don't change.
Yeah. All right, then we have the last round, very short. It's the same question to all of you about the final vision for 2030 and above. So how do you see bus sector in 7 or in 10 years, both in Europe and in your specific Nordic country? Maybe we start with Anna again. You are on mute, Anna.
Sorry.
Good.
I think we will see the model shift has happened. We are already not the model shift, but the transmission towards a zero emission public transport sector. We are already on our way, and we have some challenges ahead. I would once again like to point out that I don't understand the European attitude towards biofuels. We see what will happen in the coming years, but there is an opportunity, and we have shown we can use it. So we'll see. By today, it doesn't seem as if the European legislators and decision makers are on my path, but who knows? We have a new election coming up and things will change. I think we will manage to develop a strong public transport sector, especially in our urban areas. And I think it will be data-driven because people who start working and in the sector and using it will be used to it, so it will be a demand. I think the big challenge is to how to form the public transport sector and offers in the rural areas. We need to be able to sort of combine a lot of different technologies and knowledge in order to also make a strong offer for people who need and want to use public transport in the rural areas.
Thank you, Anna. Then Gerhard, very shortly, max 1 minute.
Thank you. I think the biggest disruptive issue is going to be autonomous, one thing that we haven't touched on today. That will, combined with all the data Johan is talking about, combined with all the different, let's say, challenges we have in rural and city areas and so on, it will be a really disruptive technology that wisely used will be environmentally a good thing.
Thank you. Johan.
So I love talking about utopia. I don't understand how we get there. Where are the brave politicians? I'm actually quite pessimistic about the future of public transport. Even though I love to promote it, I really want us to improve it. The road transport budgets towards building new roads is increasing. Public transport budgets are under distress. EVs are kind of seen as environmental friendly. Autonomous vehicles is going to be the next push for individual cars, and more cars. So we have to. I think there's a time now which is important for public transport to be really wise about the decisions and make and use. Obviously, I'm advocating for data to do the right things for the next years, or else I'm afraid that 2030 will be a big car year.
Thank you, and Agnieszka.
Yes, I'm looking at the numbers that I see when it comes to the public transportation and buses. For sure, I see it green in the future. It already has begun. So last year we saw like around 2,000 new registered buses in Europe in the half of 2022. This year, after the first half of the year, we saw more than 3,000 electric buses registered, new electric buses registered in Europe. So it goes up every single year. So it will continue like that. But for sure, we have started with the very basic things that like we need to transform the transport to the green one. But then the second thing is we need to do it in a smart way, in an intelligent way. So for sure, it will be more sustainable when it comes to the energy that we will use, the fuel that we will use, but how we will use it, or how many travelers will use the public transportation. It depends on us and how we will answer to their needs. It's something that we still need to work on.
Okay, thank you. And I guess it's time to thank all the panelists for the great input, and we all together thank the audience. And I hope to see many of you next April at BUS2BUS in Berlin. And if there are Nordic companies on the line who are considering whether I should go to Berlin or not, from my experience being 20 years in Germany and working with Scandinavian companies, in many cases, it's easy to get new customers in your perspective home country, whether it be in Finland, where you know everybody, you can take the phone and call the new customers. But in Germany and in Central Europe, it's a total different thing, though. That's why I highly recommend to visit different trade fairs and conferences to get better network, to get new leads from your sector, and that's why I would like to see as many as possible from the Nordics also next year at BUS2BUS in Berlin. By this, I would like to thank also from my side and give word back to Willow.
Yes, hello. I will conclude here from Stockholm shortly. What Mikko just said, if you're a Swedish company and curious about BUS2BUS, please feel free to reach out to me. And also, if you're anybody else and are curious about the Swedish market or Swedish stakeholders, do that as well, please. And bye from Stockholm. I'm passing on to Johan in Norway.
Yes, hi from Norway again, and thank you for a very fruitful discussion, which was very interesting to hear about the challenges and possible solutions in the public transport sector. And I think the BUS2BUS cries for visitors and to join them, because this could be the platform to have the necessary cooperations and discussions. And see you in Berlin. Thanks.
Thank you, Jan and Moa, and everyone for being here today at Nordic Roadshow. And special thanks to our special and amazing professionals, our speakers and moderator. And I also want to welcome everyone to visit Berlin on April for BUS2BUS 2024. And if you want any information about Nordic Pavilion, please contact us, me, Moa, and Jan. And then, last but not least, we will see a short film from our BUS2BUS event. And again, thank you for everyone.